Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight. Today's suggestion comes in from Caden Briggs on YouTube, and they've suggested Bugbears, which I have been very excited about. This is a monster that I've been eager to draw for a really long time because personally I'm not a huge fan of how they've been illustrated in the past in D&D. I'm not a massive fan of the way that they are, well, the way that they appear in 5e. Not that that's knocking the quality of the artwork. I think that it's presented very well. The person who drew it is obviously a very talented artist. I just don't like the way Bugbears look in D&D. So I'm eager to have a go at trying to reinvent them and see if I can make something that I'm more pleased with. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. Maybe you'll even use this representation in your games. But who knows, it's going to be fun, I'm going to enjoy it. So let's get started. So Bugbears originally found their way into D&D through the Greyhawk supplement 1st edition in 1975, and were nothing more than giant, kind of hairy goblins. And although their appearance has altered and shifted over the many years and editions of D&D, and their ecology and lore has been expanded massively since those early days, they are pretty much the same at their core. Bugbears are chaotic evil goblinoids that grow between 6 to 8 feet in height, and are brutal and savage fighters. They're of roughly human intelligence, at somewhere between 8 or 11. There's two different versions of Bugbears that we get to use in D&D right now. Their leaders are a little bit smarter, and the average Bugbear is slightly less intelligent. Their leaders are called chiefs, by the way. But despite their savagery, they're smart enough to wield weapons and wear armor and things like that, although they don't particularly have a culture, and they're not really into producing anything, so they don't craft or construct or make anything like weapons and armor. They tend to salvage things to wear, perhaps off of corpses of people who were more prepared, or maybe they get creatures that they bully, enslave, or torment to make things for them. And that's because they are famously lazy creatures. They spend most of their days snoozing and resting, only engaging in activity when it's absolutely necessary. When they do act, however, they're brutal attackers, which is mentioned in their special rule, which unsurprisingly is called Brute. In this rule, melee weapons that they use deal an extra die of their damage type when they hit, which is really cool because although they come with pretty standard weapons, if you were to equip a Bugbear with something enormous and terrifying as a weapon, they'd still do really well in combat and do an extra damage dice of it. So if you really want to scale up the challenge rating of these creatures, then that's a good way to do it. Bugbears start off at difficulty 1, but their chiefs are difficulty 3. So if you really like the idea of these creatures, as I do, and you want to use them later on in your campaigns, just make sure to give them meteor weapons, and this brute rule will still take effect. But this laziness and incredible strength actually got me thinking about a potential aesthetic for Bugbears. Despite bear being half of their name, the whole lazy but fierce kind of reminded me more of male lions, who, due to their massive size, males are usually about 550 pounds, and the females tend to be something between 260 to 400 pounds, so there's a big disparity there. Male lions also have these huge, very conspicuous manes, and so compared to female lions, male lions spend a huge amount of time, not exactly hunting or anything like that. They wait for females to bring them their kills, to feed them, to guide the pride where it needs to go, things like that. And at the same time, male lions are still ferocious. They're enormously strong. They can put this weight of their enormous bodies behind them into attacks. So their potential to be great hunters, but their reluctance to do so, this kind of disposition, has always cast lions, or at least male lions, as potentially having the personality of being really lazy. So I wanted to work with some lion-like themes while drawing them. Maybe drawing a big mane, long claws, maybe give them that kind of fur texture to them. I definitely really used this when I was drawing the mouth, giving them sort of fangs and very cat-like predatory teeth. Cat-like eyes as well was really important. But also they're goblinoid, so I wanted to make sure that they had some humanoid and sort of goblin features in there. If you watch my video on goblins, then you know I'm a big fan of a green goblin. I'm a big fan of sort of the pointed features, massive ears, long noses, tiny eyes, all this kind of stuff of goblins. And bugbears are supposed to be potentially kind of like a progenitor species for goblins, something a bit like one of the many species of apes that we evolved from. Perhaps cousins of goblins, maybe something like the Neanderthal version of goblins. So I wanted to make sure that it had this kind of green skin, maybe green fur, piercing yellow eyes, all that kind of stuff. So lions and goblins and just this huge bulk behind them. I really wanted to have this huge kind of arched back, showing the weight of this creature. And as I was drawing it, I kind of started to see a resemblance here between what I was thinking about and perhaps the Char from Guild Wars. You know, the Guild Wars series of games feature these enormous, very, very cool, quite original, giant cat-like beast people who are also very warlike and strong. But they have these really cool horns growing out the tops of their heads. Usually they have 4 ears as well, which is very inventive. But I thought it would be great to add some of these horns, and then I started getting some references from Beast, from Beauty and the Beast as well, thrown in there. So I end up experimenting with a few of these themes, and I'm pretty pleased with the result in the end. I think this is what I want my bugbears to look like. Now, as I've just mentioned, bugbears are goblinoids, and as such, as with all goblins, again, if you've watched my Goblin Monster Monday, I'll put a link to that at the end of the video, but if you have, then you'll know that goblins all worship one sort of overlord god called Maglubiet, who I talk about at length in that video. But the long and short of it, the TLDR version of Maglubiet, is that they're a conquering god who either enslaved or killed all other goblinoid gods and bound things like bugbears, hobgoblins and goblins to their service through worship and fear. Now, bugbears don't explicitly, openly worship this creature. They worship 2 brother gods, 2 gods that are brothers, Grankul and Hrugek. H-R-U-G-E-K, Hrugek. Hrugek is a fierce leader, and bugbear chiefs can be inspired by Hrugek. They have an ability called the Heart of Hrugek, which means that they have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, stunned, or put to sleep. And it's through worship of Hrugek that strength, violence, dominion, power, all of these things are really important to the bugbears. As such, they will often push around smaller creatures like their goblin cousins, kobolds, anything that wanders into the fray, and to be fair, at 8 feet tall, anything smaller than a bugbear is quite a lot of stuff, so that probably includes your adventuring party. They'll try and push around and bully, but they venerate this experience. They believe that this is a rite, an act of worship, an act of reverence of their god. They see this as a purely holy act and see absolutely nothing wrong with bullying people. Grankul, on the other hand, is the smaller brother of the 2 gods, and the bugbears believe that Grankul grants them their legendary stealth ability. Bugbears are famously stealthy despite their enormous size and their lengthy hair. Again, this is another thing that sort of drew me to the lion aesthetic, because as prowlers and hunters, lions are incredible at stealth and attacking through surprise, or at least we know that the lionesses definitely are. All bugbears have an ability called surprise attack, which they use to great advantage. They have +6 in stealth, and they have 60-foot dark vision, so preferring to attack at night, and with their amazing abilities at stealth, they'll often launch themselves at unsuspecting foes, and when they do so, they get to use this surprise attack ability, which is not far off a rogue's ability, which says if the bugbear surprises a creature and hits it with an attack during the first round of combat, the target takes an extra 2d6 damage from the attack, which is monstrous. And indeed, if you are a fan, as I am, of the playable monster races in Volo's Guide to Monsters, playing a bugbear is an amazing idea because they get this same surprise attack. They get this same extra 2d6 damage from surprise attacks. Now, the bugbears attribute Grankul for this amazing stealth, but also for their laziness. Grankul is a god of trickery, and as such, they believe that they traded this amazing innate stealth ability that all bugbears have for their energy, leaving all bugbears with this kind of listless tiredness, this sleepiness, this lethargy so that Grancool could sap them all of it, leaving Grancool with a constant vigilance and unlimited energy. But bugbears didn't miss out too much on the whole sleepiness and lack of vigilance thing, because their gods are still watching over them. Bugbears believe that if they take the heads of their opponent's leaders and place them on spikes, Grancool will see fit to protect his followers by imbuing these heads on spikes with magic. And as a result, just like the alarm spell, if anyone comes too close, if an intruder comes into a hobgoblin or a goblin host camp where these heads are on spikes, these heads will animate and start to scream, alerting all the hobgoblins within, which I think is a fantastic bit of gruesome flavour for these creatures. And indeed, there's a lot about head stealing in bugbear tradition and lore. If you'll allow me to read from Volo's guide, we hear this fantastic legend. Bugbears feature in the nightmare tales of many races, great hairy beasts that creep through the shadows as quiet as cats. If you walk alone in the woods, a bugbear will reach out of the bushes and strangle you. If you stray too far from the house at night, bugbears will scoop you up and devour you in their den. If a bugbear cuts off your head, your soul stays trapped inside, and the bugbears use your head to magically command all whom you once knew. Now that legend is a little bit of a stretch of truth in the D&D universe. I suppose you could use that, perhaps if you were to play a bugbear kind of wizard or necromancer or something along those lines. You could play someone who uses heads as their magical ingredients or their spellcasting focus, especially for the alarm spell. I love that idea. Perhaps for Speak with Dead or Charm Person, you could use somebody's severed head. This really grim legend excited me so much that I really hoped that there was some kind of real-world lore or significance to it, that I would find something about bugbears in the real world that is related to head removal. But unfortunately not. There's lots of head or face-stealing creatures in ancient legends and myths, because mythology is generally horrendously messed up, which is why it's fun to study. But in terms of bugbears, not so much. The word bugbear comes from buga in Middle English, meaning a frightening spirit or perhaps demon. From the Old Scots we get the word boggil, meaning goblin, and interestingly that word is related to a German word, Bogge, E-O-G-G-E, probably not pronouncing that right. I have a lot of German viewers though, so hopefully you guys can tell me. But either way, that is also connected to the German Ogelman, B-O with an umlaut, G-G-E-L, man, which also means goblin, perhaps sprite, and is a direct influence for the American legends of a bogeyman or boogeyman, who definitely steals children, but not in particular their heads. Now I can't remember if the bogeyman is actually in D&D. I get the feeling that he is. And as a British person, I have always been fascinated with the idea of the bogeyman because it's made reference to in almost every TV series and film and horror, everything. But it's a legend that I know nothing about because it just doesn't happen over here. You don't hear that phrase until you start watching American TV shows. So I really hope I get to do a Monster Monday on that, if that is a creature. Either way, bugbear, it means bogeyman, according to its historical roots. But in more modern terms, a bugbear is an expression for a kind of pet peeve or a minor irritation, like that really annoying feeling when you have to walk slowly behind Christmas shoppers when you're desperate to get somewhere and they just keep looking around and staring at their phones and looking up at the light and, you know, enjoying themselves, and you slowly boil and curdle with rage as you're trying to get from A to B, your path blocked by these people, or the cardinal sin of the modern age, those people who have their phones on in cinemas and will illuminate the entire theatre by texting people because they can't shut their phone off for an hour and a half. Sadly, we cannot conjure bugbears to remove their heads. But bugbears have been a cautionary tale for kids in the medieval times, just as the legend does suggest, as a warning so that people do not, stray from their settlements. Kids don't get lost in the woods. There are stories of bears coming to kill children who would run away into the forests at night, often a demonic bear, which, again, kind of adds value to me putting horns on this thing, which I really like. But before I got distracted, I was talking about Bugbear Gods, their worship in D&D, and they have one other god that I've not mentioned, Skigaret, S-K-I-G-G-A-R-E-T, who is kind of their bogeyman. He's their embodiment of fear. a manifestation of pure fear and terror. And this is not something that they imbue, that they channel, that they cause in other creatures. This is the fear of the bugbears themselves. Although they hate this part of themselves, all bugbears are inherently cowardly. If they find themselves on the losing end of a fight, perhaps fighting an opponent that's much stronger than them or a horde of enemies, they will instinctively flee, and they find it really hard to resist that urge. Little goblins, as part of their massive host armies, will often try and rouse a bugbear from its inescapable slumber with bribes, money, offers of food, of wealth, of goods. When they finally manage to do so, they'll have this lumbering hulk to help them in their battle, only for this creature to turn tail and flee when the going gets too tough. And this is what makes bugbears, in my opinion, great playable species, because they are often known, once they've fled, to encounter another band of adventurers or perhaps the opposing side of an army, and they're very easy to bribe. They're totally chaotic creatures. They don't really have an allegiance one way or the other. They worship their gods and what have you, but if they encounter people and they're outnumbered and they've already fled, they can easily be bribed to hunt down the people that abandoned them in their time of need, the rest of their army, the rest of their goblin host, and will fight against them. They'll kill these people for better bribes, which makes a really interesting character to use. Someone who just doesn't mind. They're very, very strong, super lazy, and a worthy ally, provided that they, again, don't flee from combat. If it weren't for their head-taking nature and their worship of Hrugek, the bullying god, I'd probably place these creatures on a neutral evil or unaligned alignment. But they seem very human-like in nature to me as a result of that. They're not far off the same intelligence, they wield weapons, they wield armor, they have vulnerabilities, they have flaws, they have skills, they're very strong, but they're also fearful. There's a whole breadth of human experience in there. They wear armor, most of these things have an armor class of somewhere between 16 or 17. They have shields and chain armor. They have ranged javelin attacks and a sort of Morningstar bludgeoning attack. Bugbear chiefs also get a multi-attack, so they can use 2 attacks per round. They understand Common and Goblin, so they're used to dealing with outsiders. They're probably the most likely to be in a city out of all the sort of goblinoid races, unless we're talking about a hobgoblin city by itself. We'll get onto hobgoblins at another time. But they're resourceful, they like to use traps and things like that, just as other goblins do. So they're an all-rounded, sort of well-fleshed-out creature that really make for great enemies if you're bored of using orcs for the 300th time. So I definitely recommend that you give these guys a go. So anyway guys, this has been the Bugbear, a wonderful suggestion and something that I really enjoyed reinventing the image of for my own use. If you prefer the way that they've been represented in the past, then fair dues. I hope you enjoy using them, or if you want to use my version, you're very welcome to incorporate that into your games. But I had huge fun drawing this. If you like this drawing and you'd like a copy for yourself, I'd urge you to head over to my Patreon page, where backers of various different levels get either digital or physical versions of all of my Monster Mondays that I draw each month. And if you want to help this channel to grow, then please make sure to leave a little thumbs up, a little like down below there. Maybe leave a comment, favourite this video, share it with someone who you think might also enjoy learning about D&D monsters or seeing more stuff from this channel. I know that sounds like something that's kind of tacked on to the end of almost every video you watch on YouTube, but if you do want to support this channel, that really massively does actually help. So thank you very much, and until next time guys, don't stray too far from your medieval village where a giant green demon bear might come out and sever your head to use for an alarm spell. So happy monster hunting, and I'll see you next week.